record this one on the cloud. We'll see how that works. Okay. So get rid of that. Okay. So now I'm trying to get how do I get rid of this stupid bar? Why? Okay. Now. There we go. Okay, so hi everybody. Thank you for joining for session 2 today. I'm so looking forward to kind of going through this with you. Basically, all the application questions that you submitted about the entire kind of application and researching firms process, we hope to touch on throughout this presentation today. So hopefully we will kind of come across all the questions that you've asked and they will be answered. If at any point at the end of the session you feel that your question hasn't been answered, then feel free to contact either myself or Tracy, both via LinkedIn or kind of Instagram, and we will definitely answer those for you. We are conscious that we only have an hour and a half. We wanted to touch on everything, so we've tried to kind of collate all your questions into sections in which we'll be focused on throughout. So just for those that don't know me, my name's Amy. I'm the founder of The Legal Path, which is a resource-based platform that's been created for aspiring solicitors in order to provide you with some resources, some guidance, and just a little bit of support really, because I think I realised going through this process that it is a very isolated process and it can be quite lonely at times, especially when you're stressed and you're wondering if you're able to kind of secure the TC. So I wanted to create a platform that was a realistic insight into kind of the nature of the application process, but provide you with things that can try and make this process a little bit easy. And that is basically what myself and Tracy, as you know, platforms that are helping aspiring solicitors, are intended to do. It's just to try and make this process a little bit kind of easier for you and for you to feel supported. I'm also a future trainee at Taylor Wessing, having completed a virtual vacation scheme with them this summer. I was offered the training contract to commence in August of 2022. That's obviously coronavirus permitting. We'll see how things go. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I'll pass on to Tracy now.
Hi everyone, I'm Tracy, a future trainee at Rosenblatt, due to commence my TC next September 2021. I've started Trainee and Me as an initiative to kind of pass on the tips and tricks that I've learned during my application process to aspiring solicitors in the hope that they can use it to get training contracts.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to start by answering some of your kind of more basic questions. So you wanted to know about our journeys into law and kind of what made us apply to the firms that we've applied to. So Tracy, if you want to start.
Yeah, so I decided to go into law after realising through my work experiences, working client-facing roles such as on a fish stall and on a pub, that I really enjoyed providing services to clients. So I knew that I wanted to go into a career which would allow me to have access to clients. When I decided to study law at university, I had an idea that I was going to be a solicitor, but it wasn't really a solid kind of career path. But while studying law, I decided that I really enjoyed reading law. And so I kind of wanted to combine the two things that I liked, clients and law. And I decided to go down the solicitor's path. In terms of my experience securing a training contract, I started applying in second year while I was at university, and I sent off quite a lot of applications. A lot of them just didn't get anywhere because I didn't really know what I was doing. For some, I got to the next stage, which was the psychometric test, but then obviously failed on that hurdle. But luckily for another application, I also made it to an interview, but didn't make it onto the VAC scheme. So that application cycle, I didn't really get on any VAC scheme or training contract offers. I didn't apply for any VAC schemes or training contracts in my third year, and then went to do my LPC without having secured a training contract. And it was during my LPC, or the summer of completing my LPC, that I received my training contract offer for Rosenblatt after doing a week-long vacation scheme with them. In terms of what made me stand out from other candidates, I think a lot of tailoring my application, being more confident, and also just my experiences volunteering at the personal support unit, which helps litigants in person. I could use that when I was going through the application process with Rosenblatt, because Rosenblatt has a large dispute resolution practice. So I kind of tailored myself to that firm using this experience. And how did I know that Rosenblatt was the right firm for me? That was kind of consolidated during my week-long vacation scheme with them. I really liked how everyone made time to get to know me, even though I was just a vacation scheme student. And I think that was just a nice, everyone being so friendly, but also hardworking, is how I decided that Rosenblatt was a firm that I wanted to train at.
Fantastic. So about kind of my decision to go into law, I am going to be a cliche here, and I am going to say that I have wanted to be a lawyer since I was very young. By that, I don't mean 5, I mean probably from around 12 and 13. So I am the kind of stereotypical answer that recruiters don't want to see. And basically, I competed in a national mock trial competition during my time at high school, and I found it so interesting to kind of deconstruct problems and identify legal solutions. But more so, as the lead advocate, I was responsible for presenting those findings to a court full of different individuals, and I found that really empowering. And I was deciding between the law kind of legal route and that of the veterinary route, and I didn't like blood, so unfortunately it did leave the legal route for me, and I attended a number of law fairs and open days. I got to kind of understand more about the avenues into the profession, but to be quite frank, I didn't know about kind of the GDL, so doing a degree and then obviously conversed it with the GDL. I wasn't very much made aware of the solicitor apprenticeship route. So I just went down the kind of bog standard legal route. I enjoyed kind of the law. I did law at college, and I thought that a degree would be great to kind of cement my academic and theoretical side of law and get that kind of experience. So after doing my my law degree, I went on to the LPC, even though I hadn't secured a training contract, which I imagine some of you are probably in that position. You start to panic, and it's such a natural human reaction to have, to think, what's next? But the thing that you need to remember is to don't let it demotivate you. Everybody's journey is different. My journey was a little bit longer. Tracy, I think you took 2 years, is that correct?
Yeah.
2-3 cycles, yeah. So, we aren't kind of the stereotypical drop out of uni, go straight into LPC, straight onto your training contract. It was very much a kind of longer process with a few little bumps along the way, but you've just got to continue to be motivated. And I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, so I gained a great amount of experience. I did a vacation scheme with Shoesmith, but unfortunately that didn't turn into a training contract interview. And I went to travel for 3 months across Asia this year, and decided that actually, in all the prior years to this point, I think because I was so desperate for it to happen, I wasn't able to perform to my kind of the high standard that I would normally perform. So this year, having traveled and done a little bit of kind of reevaluation, what am I doing wrong? What approach was I taking, and how is that incorrect? And I realized I was just throwing out so many applications that neither of them, not one of them was very unique and specific to that firm in question, and they were just becoming easy no's. So by taking a more tailored approach this year and identifying firms I really felt that I could see myself working for, I completed 6 to 7 vacation scheme applications, got a number of interviews, and happened to secure 2 vacation schemes at both Taylor Weston and Denton's. After a virtual vacation scheme with Taylor Weston, I secured a training contract. And the process leading up to this point, I've realised that everything had kind of happened for a reason, and I wasn't supposed to get the opportunities prior to this because it wasn't the right firm for me. So yeah, definitely bear that in mind. A rejection isn't kind of, it's not a setback. It's basically a reevaluation, and it's a comeback to kind of a better outcome for you. So what made me stand out from other candidates, without being a bit too modest, I think naturally I'm quite a bubbly person, so I do build relationships quite quickly with people, and that's the same at kind of interview level. So I go to an interview and I'm very much myself. I don't try to be somebody that I'm not. in previous years, I've tried that attempt and it doesn't work. So I've always been my bubbly kind of self. And Taylor Weston really values your own individual personality and wants you to be yourself and be your true authentic self. It's something that's quite often branded about the office, you know, this idea of being one's true authentic self. And as a person that thrives with being able to be herself, in an environment like that, I felt that I was able to stand out a lot because I was just being myself and being, you know, able to build those relationships naturally without it being intense or kind of forced. And also the thing that I think stood me out was the approach I took this application cycle. So obviously I was a kind of guinea pig year with the virtual vacation schemes. So that did consist of a need for a different approach to building those relationships. So rather than just sitting back and waiting for the vacation scheme, which would naturally build relationships anyway, I took the approach of reaching out to people from the firm on LinkedIn and asking for a virtual coffee with them to just get to know a bit more about the firm before starting. And it happened that a lady I'd spoken to the week prior to my vacation scheme was my trainee buddy. So when it came to my first day, I already knew her and we'd already built quite a great relationship. So, you know, it really does make a difference with having that proactive mentality. Don't be scared to kind of reach out and build those relationships at the earliest point that you possibly can. And finally, how did I know the firm was the right firm for me? I think it sounds very cliche to say, but you know in your heart when a firm is the right firm for you. You know, I've been to a number of assessment centres and I've never felt the way that I did at Taylor Weston's assessment centre. You know, from the minute I walked in the door, everybody was extremely friendly. No question was too, you know, silly or stupid. Nobody, even during the vacation scheme, which was virtual and it was quite bizarre times, you know, everybody made a point of making time for us as candidates. Because they knew that we weren't getting the full experience. So I think as a firm, Taylor Weston go above and beyond and they really value their people. And I want to work for a firm that encourages you to be yourself and that values you as a person. And those two things very much align with Taylor Weston and the reason why I'm very much happy to kind of start my career with them. So hopefully that answers that. On to the second slide. So from all the questions that we've received, there's quite a few common kind of sections that we put together. And one of those is researching law firms and how to do so effectively. And so we're going to go on to this now. So first of all, some helpful resources. So we have things like Legal Cheek, which I think is fantastic because it gives you a realistic insight into a firm, which without sounding too mean, sometimes firms' recruiter sites, they are, you know, designed to be appealing and they don't give you a realistic insight into what a firm is like, whereas Legal Cheek gathers a number of information from a number of the sources and really evaluates firms from their competitors. So you get more of a kind of, I guess, a realistic insight into the firm and how it operates. Other online resources include Watson's Daily, Roll on Friday. LinkedIn have a section in the right-hand corner of your screen, which is LinkedIn News, and they do some fantastic roll-ups of what is going on within a firm at that particular time, and if they're in the news, they'll be there. And the Financial Times, things like that. You know, you'll see kind of specific clients or specific firms in the Financial Times. But for me, the Financial Times hasn't always been my go-to piece of resource because I find it really hard to engage with that. So just try and find a resource method that you can align with and that you can kind of introduce into your normal daily life. So I'm not the type to sit with a coffee in the morning reading the Financial Times. It just doesn't work for me. But I will, on my daily walk, listen to a podcast about specific things that are going on within the legal environment. So find what works for you. Yeah, Tracy, do you want to continue?
Yeah, so there's the Legal 500 as well, which is something that I use quite a lot in my during my applications because it kind of gives you a specific firm profile and then also has rankings based on the practice areas for the top firms in those practice areas. So it's a really, really good resource to use. Obviously, there's firm websites and recruitment brochures. Those are probably the first resources that you're going to use. But it's so important to go deeper. If you find something on the firm's website that you're really interested in, I would kind of do more research using other websites to build up a bigger picture. Like Amy said, webinars, she likes listening podcasts and stuff like that to find out more information. I agree, podcasts are great. Webinars are also really good because you listen to information about the firm, but then there's also Q&As at the end in most webinars, so you have the opportunity to ask questions to representatives from the firm. You can also set Google alerts for any new information that's coming on Google. So I would do that for firms you're really seriously interested in applying to. Also social media, Instagram Q&As. I would actually have a look at the trainees or HR from firms you're interested in and see if they have any law pages, personal pages, but that are law related, and see if they do any Instagram lives and Q&As, etc., like we do, because then you can ask questions to them that you may have in a more informal setting. And then, of course, networking opportunities. In this day and age, there's quite a lot of virtual networking events. I know I've done one and Amy's doing one soon. These are really, really good for you to be able to speak to a variety of trainees from the comfort of your home.
Yeah, and just a point about those things that Tracy was focusing on there, with things like social media, Instagram Live, question and answers, networking opportunities like webinars and things like that, firms will pick up on those people that are kind of routinely accessing those. If your name's popping up and you're asking questions continuously, they will pick up on that, and they'll see you as somebody that's really trying to get to know that firm on a deeper level. And so it has its own benefits. Equally with networking opportunities, one thing that I will always say is go to an event with questions in mind that you really, really want the answer to, because the networking events are created to provide you with an opportunity to ask as many questions as you want and get a kind of a deeper level of insight into them. So do go prepared with questions and be confident enough to ask them, because then you can use that in your application form, and it might just be that little extra something that you've picked up because you've had the confidence to do it, which sets your application apart. So that would be a little bit of a top tip. And then we have things like Companies House, which has some really interesting information on there, which we probably already know. And so it's not just about how what resources we use, but it's actually about how we research and doing so in an effective way. So Tracy, do you want to continue?
Yeah, so it's great to have all the research done for the firm you're applying to, but it's also really important to have it organised in a way that means you can access the various pieces of information when and if you want to. At the beginning, when I started doing my research, I didn't have any structure to, all the bits of information that I had in a document, and it meant that when I came to write my applications, it was just really, really hard to actually assimilate that information into an application form. So I would really recommend having some sort of template or structure to your research, and make sure that you use headings to break up the research. So for one example, you could have as a heading would be kind of the training contract itself at the firm. So you could talk about how underneath it, the structure of the training contract, how you, what choice you have with your seats, secondment opportunities, retention rates, how many trainees you take on, etc. That would be under one heading. And then you could have other headings underneath that. And you have to make sure that you add any further research into this document. So when it comes to application season and even before interviews, you just have this coherent document with all the relevant pieces of information that you need. In terms of template, I know Amy's created a really helpful template guide that if you don't have already, I would definitely recommend you ask for a copy of, because it essentially has the headings and the various bits of information that you need in a document.
Yeah, and just a point on that, by no means are we saying that this is kind of the go-to approach. I know people, and me personally, when I created the document that I've created to gather this research, this was what works for me. So your methods might be a bit different, but I think the kind of overarching principle here is don't just collate information and have it on scraps of pieces of paper everywhere. Do it so in a way that it's cohesive and it's methodical, so that when you come to using this research later on down the line, it will save you time and you'll know exactly where to go to. Because from my previous experience, I have been one of those that goes to like every event, writes so many things, and I'm like, where is that document that I had on such a firm and their kind of strategic plan? But having a document within your computer that has everything and you continue to add to it, and it's so methodical and organized, it just saves you so much time, and it will, put you in great stead for the kind of interviews and assessment processes. And so next, how to make yourself stand out after completing your research. Now, this was quite a common question that was asked quite a lot. We're all doing the same research. How do we make that specific to us and make ourselves stand out? And I think actually it's about the way that you interpret the research, and then you make it relevant to you and the firm. So one really important fact here is don't just write statistics or facts just for the sake of it, because it's not going to get you any extra points. And in actual fact, it's pretty irrelevant to have it if it's not relevant to the role or the firm that you're applying to. For instance, an example that I often use, I work for a tech company, and Taylor Wesson is, a statistic that I found, or a fact that I found, is that Taylor Wesson are the most innovative law firm in Europe. They continue to integrate innovative practices throughout their entire firm. And it's nice to put that there, but what else? What's that step further? And that's where candidates seem to fall down. It's not just enough to put the statistic, you have to make it relevant. So, for example, Taylor Wesson are the most innovative law firm in Europe. I currently work for a tech company, and in my current role, I have identified the positives that can come from innovating client experience and innovating internal and external processes. Now, because I am quite a creative thinker, and I'm encouraged within my current role to think outside the box and find better ways of servicing our clients, I can bring this mindset into a firm like Taylor Wesson, who encourages innovative and creative thinking, to try and not only produce a positive impact on clients by enhancing their experience, but actually by enhancing client experience as a firm, we can differentiate ourselves from our competitors, and actually we can ensure that they remain our customers or our clients and don't move over to competitors. And it's that customer loyalty that's going to allow firms to stay ahead of the curve and profitable. So I hope you can see that it's not just enough to put the statistic, you have to make it relevant to the firm and the role that you're applying to, and why you are the right fit for that firm based on the research that you've completed. Tracy, do you want to continue?
Yeah, and just to further on what Amy said, just writing a statistics is going to show that you can Google the firm. Basically, you want to be selling yourself to the firm. And I came up with an analogy in session 1, which I came up with on the spot, and I actually thought it was quite a good way of explaining. But you just think of it as a circle. For every point that you make about the firm, you've got to bring in an example, drawing on your experiences to kind of show how that's important to you, and then link it back to how it's going to be helpful to the firm. And that's basically what you want to be doing for all your points to make you stand out. We got asked a question basically about whether aspiring solicitors should be applying to firms which they think are going to be less competitive to get a training contract. And we had a discussion over this, and we just think that this mindset is completely counterproductive. You don't want to be applying and looking for firms where simply because you think that it's easier to get a training contract, because at the end of the day, training contracts at particular firms is all about finding the right fit for you. Not every single firm is going to be somewhere which is a good environment for you to train in, and you're not going to fit in, basically. So the thing that should be differentiating what firms you're applying to is whether you think that it's going to be a great environment for you to do well in, not whether it's going to be easy for you to get a training contract. Unfortunately, getting a training contract is really competitive across all types of firms, and there's no kind of easy route to getting a training contract. So I think just don't have this mentality of, I'm going to apply to this firm, or I'm only going to look at the firms where it's easier to get a training contract, because it probably isn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, over to the next slide. So how to find out a deeper level of research. So you know, we talked about this in the previous slide, but these are things like business model, potential expansion plans, strategic objectives, annual reports, 5-year plans. These aren't things that are going to be accessible on a website, a firm's website, for instance. They are things that are going to require a little bit of a deeper level of researching. And there are online sources that may potentially discuss things like this. And there are newspaper articles that often talk about potential expansion plans, or what's next for a firm. But actually I found the best way of kind of gathering this information is actually attending the firm's offices for kind of an open day. As I've, throughout my kind of research and my experience, the one thing that I have realized is that firms and their partners and their trainees are so passionate about speaking about their firm and what's next for their firm. So if you ask the questions, they are going to be more than happy to discuss them with you. Obviously, there has to be a line because they're not going to give away any kind of competitive, confidential information, but they are rightly, you know, to kind of consider what's next. And it's more than fine for you to ask a partner, you know, their role is predominantly focused on finding the next step for that firm to take. They have to put forward business proposals about what's next for their firm. So they're going to have things that they're already thinking about, but it's completely fine for you to ask, you know, where do you think the firm is going in the next 5 years? What's next? What are the emerging markets? And do you see yourself kind of breaking into those? So yeah, open days are a fantastic way of getting that information that's not going to be accessible to all. And it, again, may potentially put you in a position where you're kind of ahead of a candidate because you have that little bit of insight. So again, don't be scared to ask questions. These events are created for the sole purpose of providing you with the opportunity to discuss any questions that you have. So be confident enough to do it. But Tracy, your experience is a little bit different because Rosenblatt is a limited company, isn't it?
Yeah, so Rosenblatt's listed on AIM, and it did so I think in 2019, or I think, gosh, I probably know the date, but so for me, finding these pieces of information was a lot easier, just because there's actually information that has to be released legally when you list, and also B, because I think during the gear up to them listing, they were doing, well, the CEO was doing a lot of interviews to talk about the firm and to promote it as well. So it was really helpful for me to find their interviews, to listen in basically about what Rosenblatt was trying to do, what he wanted to do as a result of listing, and to hear about the other companies that the holding group were also acquiring at the time. So it was easier for me to find out this information. But even if your firm's not listed, the information will be out there. Just take the time to really delve into it. I know that a lot of, like, for annual reports, for example, they're quite meaty documents, and there's a lot of information in there, but it's quite hard to just read it because it's quite mathematical and etc. But just take the time because there'll be really interesting bits of information that you could pick out and talk about.
Yeah. Okay, so stage 3 of this kind of presentation, we gathered that you wanted a bit more information about the application process, and there was quite a few common questions that kind of appeared, so hopefully we can touch all on them. So the first question was, when is the right time to start applying? And I understand that's quite a difficult question to answer because it depends on you and your own personal kind of experiences and where you want to apply to. So first of all, apply when you feel you're ready to apply. Don't rush into anything. Make sure you spend some time researching firms. It will be so much more beneficial to spend a little bit less, you know, a little bit more time on researching. Don't be one of those first people that submit the applications, but then make sure your application is a quality application where you can show that you have put forward, you know, your time and effort into researching the firm and getting a better understanding of why that firm is the right firm for you. So definitely, you know, take that into consideration. But equally, you know, it depends on the firm in question. So you've got to consider, first of all, is the firm recruiting on a rolling basis, because this is going to have some kind of consideration as to whether you apply straight away or not. So if it's a rolling basis, it is very much that, you know, they will give offers as they come in. So you do need to be as kind of proactive as you possibly can be to ensure that you're putting yourself in the best position of, you know, getting an offer as you can. But again, there's that fine line between quality over kind of, rushing to get it in and being one of the first people that they consider, because there's no use you submitting an application that opens on the 3rd, on the 4th of September, for instance, because, it's not going to be of a quality, and they're going to think, how on earth have you been able to research, pick out the questions, draft them and review them enough that you can submit it within one day. So just use your common sense. The right time to apply depends on you, your own firms that you've selected. Look at which firms that you really want to apply to. What are their dates, their closing dates? And actually, if they are your really kind of dream firms, say top 3, for instance, you want to make sure you're prioritizing them, so you're putting your best foot forward and your chances of success are higher. But again, it's about quality. So it just really, really does truly depend on you. Don't leave it till last minute. If you're anything like me, in my second application cycle, I was wanted to apply to a firm that was recruited on a rolling basis. I saw that their deadline didn't end till December or January time. I sent my application at the end of November, beginning of December, just thinking nothing of it. It was quite late on the year, and I got an email straight back saying, unfortunately, we have filled all our vacation scheme interview spots, so we will not be offering any others in the time going forward. So, I left it till last minute and it didn't pay off. So just be very conscious of time. Use the tracker that I've produced. I've produced a tracker that allows you to kind of consider the virtual events that they have, underway, what things you need to consider in terms of researching, how much time to put into researching, and actually track the application form as you would, an essay. Fill in some time in your diary for researching, fill in some time for drafting, and fill in some time for reviewing before you submit. It has to take as much of that kind of step and that process as you would for kind of an essay. So yeah, hopefully that provides you with some advice.
Yeah, I completely agree. In my first application cycle, I was sending off applications literally like minutes before the deadline, which just it's not going to get you anywhere basically. So just spend the time, plan well, and just know when you're going to be, set deadlines for yourself for when you're going to be sending off applications to the different firms. The second question we had, and I get asked this question a lot, is how many law firms we should apply to. There shouldn't be a set number that people tell you that you should apply to. I know that people tend to apply to around 6 to 10 firms, but at the end of the day, if those 6 applications are all rushed and not of a good quality, it doesn't make a difference whether you've submitted 6. But you should make sure every application that you send is of a really good quality, that you've actually tailored, your answers, spent time researching and spent time checking over this, over your application form. And if that means that you've only sent off, 2 or 3 applications, then so be it. But at least you know that for each of those applications, you've given it your best shot. So that would be my answer. Just have a list as well, actually, of the law firms that you're going to apply to, because I know my unsuccessful application cycle, I was just researching, saw a firm that I liked, thought I'd apply to it, finished that application, and I was like, oh, which firm should I apply to next? And I think Amy has touched on in a previous session that you actually might end up finding later down the line that you really wanted to apply to a firm. I think it was Taylor Wessing, that you don't have time to apply to it because you only just come across the firm now. So just be really organized, and definitely I would spend some time now making a list and try and put it into hierarchical order of order of preference in which firm you'd actually want to work at, and then having that list, you can then just work on each application at one time.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a point on that, I think the overarching kind of principle with this kind of what Tracy was saying there is you can control so little really in an application process, but the things you can control is identifying the right firms, making sure you're applying to those firms and doing so in a way that you can be proud of every application that you're submitting. Everything else then kind of falls on the balance of probabilities and the hope that somebody does see your application and really likes it and likes the kind of things you stand for. So, take control of the things that you can control, and stay in control of the application process throughout. It can seem at times that it kind of, you don't know where everything's up to. You're like, oh, there's a deadline coming. I need to make sure my application form is submitted. But if you keep those things kind of in check, you keep your research up to date, you keep your tracker up to date, you keep the dates in your head of the events, and you make sure that you plan towards those. There's no reason why you should feel so kind of sense of anxiety that you get with the application process. And so moving on, how can I be detailed in my application answers with a short word limit? That's a really good question. And if you're anything like me, I'm very much, you probably have identified already, a bit of a waffler. So I can go off on a tangent, and that's been the hardest thing during this application process, is that I've had to kind of curtail. So for instance, when you have a word count of 250, the first thing that you need to make sure you're doing is using the word count to its required capacity and actually answering the question. So a lot of the applications I've read in the past, friends, things like that, they often seem to kind of go off on a tangent. And when I look back, I always seem to say to them, ask yourself why. So if you ask yourself why when you're answering the question and it isn't fully explained and you haven't exhausted that reason why within your answer, you haven't answered it correctly. Equally, if you could pick that answer up and place it somewhere else in another application for a different role entirely, and it still applies, it's not specific enough. So be specific with your answers. Answer the question that's actually being asked. Consider the question. Your first sentence, I think you said prior, Tracy, what was your top tip about the first sentence?
So it's about all to do with the structure of your answers. And with a short word limit, you can put paragraphs in them, and I would highly advise you do put paragraphs in them just to break it up. And my tip is always, you should be able to, for the whoever's reading it, they should be able to get from the first line of each paragraph what you're basically going to be talking about in your answer. That's how I structured my application answers with such a short word limit.
Yeah, and I think that's really, really beneficial. So use the word limit to your advantage. You don't have a lot of words. 250 isn't that much really in terms of word count. So you haven't got time to kind of blab on about things that aren't relevant. Use the word count effectively to answer the question. Talk about things that you find really interesting so that you can do so in a way that's persuasive to the recruiter who's reading the application form. And make sure that once I always drafted my answers in Word before I submitted them onto my application form, just to make sure there's no spelling errors and actually that it makes sense. And then when you put it in that box, it's ready to be submitted. So just kind of take a very considered approach when having a short word count to make the most of the words that you've got, and to have kind of more of a positive impact on the recruiter. So yeah, next.
So the next question is about critical reasoning tests, how to perform well on them. My number one top tip would be to practice and then practice and then practice some more, because you can train your brain to do well with critical reasoning tests. The first Watson Glaser test that I did, I really struggled on, but I did practice quite a lot, and then by the end of it, I kind of knew that the answers I was submitting were going to be the correct answers. It's just practicing. I use assessment day to practice my critical reasoning tests, but also through my experience, I did a a verbal reasoning test for Gowling, and while I had practiced it before and felt comfortable doing it through my practice, on the actual test itself, when I did the real thing, the timing was literally basically cut in half, so it was a lot more time pressured than I was used to, and it actually got to the point where I think I had about a couple of minutes left, and I just had to click through all the answers and randomly guess, because I just simply was running out of time. So while obviously there's a lot of practice out there for critical reasoning tests, just be mindful of the fact that it might be slightly different to the actual thing in real life when you do the actual test. So just be ready to kind of adapt to those changes should they happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've touched on question 5. Again, you should prioritise rolling apps because they are rolling for a reason. They will consider you at the earliest possible opportunity. So the earliest as early as you can get it in, the better, but obviously with that fine balance that we talked about earlier, in terms of quality. Quality is so much more important than trying to rush your application in. So do take some time to really kind of consider, is your application up to a standard which you can be proud of submitting? And that will be, you know, really kind of beneficial for you. I'm not going to talk about this question until the next section. Because actually all the questions on the next session, you know, can kind of consider this. So first of all, we're going to consider, is it worth applying to firms if I do not meet their academic requirements, including A-level, or if I've completed the LPC? Tracy, do you want to consider this one?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of not meeting the academic requirements, you have to ask yourself, how far away are you from the academic requirements? If you're pretty close, then if you're sure it's a firm that you really do want to apply for, then I would just go ahead with it, because at the end of the day, your experiences are going to be probably a little bit more important. And if you do have experiences and you've got a strong application, it might be the case that they'll just kind of glance over your A-level results. But at the same time, be realistic. If your A-levels, for example, are really far away from what they ask for, then because it's so competitive to, you know, apply for training contracts, I would just be realistic and think about maybe applying for firms which don't put as much weight on A-levels. And obviously there are some firms which have just completely removed A-level requirements completely. So that's just something to think about. In terms of like whether you had your LPC completed or not, did you want to cover that?
Yeah, well, that's fine. So my LPC, I had the LPC before commencing my virtual vacation scheme with Taylor Weston. Do I think it's a necessity? No. You know, when you're applying to a trainee role, they are considering you on the understanding that you don't have the LPC initially. Everybody is at the same level. You know, there's people applying that are in their second year of university who haven't done the LPC. There are no more students who haven't even, you know, studied any law at all. So they consider you at the same level, and everybody's on the same level playing field. So they're not going to expect you to do a task that only somebody that's done the LPC would be able to perform successfully at. The work on the virtual vacation schemes or any back schemes are real life kind of tasks that no prior legal knowledge is required. So I don't think it's a necessity, but equally from somebody that's done the LPC, and if I knew now that I was going to secure a training contract with Taylor Weston, would I have not self-funded the LPC? No, I would have continued with the same process as I've done now, because for me, it was the right decision for me to make, because the LPC itself is a fantastic course that I really, really thoroughly enjoyed. And it's gained so many, you know, it's allowed me to gain so many key skills and experiences that, yes, I believe I performed a lot better during the vacation scheme, not because I had skills that other candidates didn't have or kind of theory that other candidates didn't have, but actually it's a practical course that allows you to think like a lawyer would, act like a lawyer would, and it just prepared me mentally for the kind of intensity that was the virtual vacation scheme. So it's not a necessity by any means, but it's also not something to think of as a disadvantage. You know, it's fine either way. One thing that I thought we could touch on about the A-levels thing as well, it's just come to me, you know, I think a realistic point of view is actually really important, because what you don't want to do is waste time applying to a firm that's not going to consider you because you don't meet their requirements, and you could use that time to make an even stronger application form for a firm that is going to consider you. So just, you know, that's a tactic really that you could consider. Is it really worth applying to a firm that isn't going to consider you? And it's always worth asking grad recruitment. Some of my mentees this week were asking me the same thing, and I said, you know, contact grad recruitment, see what they say. They've contacted grad recruitment. Grad recruitment have said, yes, I'm more than happy to, you know, we were more than happy to consider you, even though you've not reached that level. And, you know, that in itself is something that will kind of put your kind of, I guess, questions or queries at ease. And it's taken control of that situation, so you don't have to worry or waste, you know, unnecessary time. So going on to the next question, will I be disadvantaged if I do not have legal or kind of any work experience? We wanted to talk about this actually in a roundabout way. So firstly, you know, legal work experience isn't a necessity either. You know, you don't have to have it. It's super, super competitive. You know, we're already trying to access a highly saturated market. So we understand that it's not always easy to get legal work experience. My first point is that work experience holds just as much weight as legal work experience does. So for instance, myself, I did a bit of work experience in a firm in Liverpool when I was in, I think, second year of university. And for the entire week, all I did was make cups of tea, photocopy and run errands for people. And that didn't give me any kind of physical transferable skills that I could take into the legal profession. My role as a shift manager at McDonald's, where I was responsible for working under a fast-paced environment and working with a team collaboratively, has developed so many skills that I know I can transfer into the profession. So it's about using the experiences that you have and showcasing to the recruiter that these experiences have developed fantastic skills and it will put you in great stead for commercial or legal practice. So use what you have in a positive way. Equally, you know, if you can get legal work experience, that is fantastic, because you do want to show a commitment to the profession. And I think that's the only issue with not having any legal work experience whatsoever. You know, it may, you know, be one of the questions that they ask you: how can I prove, you know, you are dedicated to the profession? But I think something to remember is legal work experience can take different formats. Tracy, do you want to consider those?
Yeah. So even though I think when everyone thinks of legal work experience, people think of actual physical time in a law firm. And while that's a great eye-opener into how law firms run and kind of the atmosphere in law firms, I think also remember that legal clinics exist. You can volunteer at legal charities. These all count as legal work experiences, and they're less competitive to get onto. So I, at BPB, got involved with the pro bono bit, which was basically the personal support unit, which helps litigants in persons. And that was a really good experience for me to kind of just see like how courts are run and how court cases move through courts, etc. And that all counts as legal work experience. I had to send off one application, but then I got it. So just remember that there are different types of legal work experience, and I would just try and get, if possible, like a range of them, and just don't worry too much about not getting physical time in a law firm right now, because HR are going to be mindful of the fact that that's pretty much impossible now, but definitely seek other ways of getting some sort of legal work experience.
Yeah. Do you want to go on to the third question?
Yeah, so this is all about whether it's superficial to say that you're interested in a firm's practice area when you don't have any experience in it. I personally would tend to not. Obviously, it's important for you to be interested in the firm's practice areas, because at the end of the day, if you're not, then you wouldn't be a good fit for the firm. But at the same time, don't hone into one specific practice area, because realistically, you're not going to have abundance of proper time in that practice area to be able to come to that conclusion. I've read some applications where students have said that they are really interested in a particular practice area because they did that module on their LLB, which that is going to be, in my opinion, superficial, because reading a particular module at university is very different to how it is in practice. So unless you had like direct experience and a strong experience, then I would tend to not hone into one area, because you want to keep your eye, your mind open, your eyes open to different practice areas, because you're not going to really know where you want to qualify into at this stage. Even I and Amy, we don't know which practice area we're going to qualify into after our training contracts, but it's just important to keep an open eye.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to touch on that, from my personal experience, I applied to Taylor Weston. They have a very kind of sector focused approach. So they have a number of leading sectors, for example, life sciences, tech and communications, energy and infrastructure. And I don't have any direct contact to those sectors. But what I have been able to do is I've been able to show them that from my work experience, from the experiences that I have to date, that I have developed the necessary skills. So whatever the practice area is that I end up, experience in, I can use those skills and provide a high level of service every time. So I think it's not superficial to be interested in something. We all have our I'm quite tech focused, so Taylor Weston was obviously a common option for me. But equally, I don't have any direct contact to legal tech work, so it's not a necessity. Just use what you've got and just show why you are the right candidate for them and for the role. So finally, how do you distinguish firms to each other if they are classed in the same category? For example, Magic Circle, Silver Circle, Global, US, etc. I think one key word here, research. It might look on the surface that they are all within a specific category, but actually once you get to know a firm by attending open days, more fairs, webinars, live question answers, etc., you'll get to realise that the culture of the firm will be different. The clients that they operate you with and provide their services with are different. The way that they operate and their kind of processes will be different. So by no means does a category kind of provide an overarching way that the firms operate, and they are all different and unique in their own way, and you will gain that understanding by actually experiencing them firsthand. And equally, for me, I had my kind of beliefs at the service before I started my virtual vacation scheme, but actually when I was experiencing the culture firsthand by the vacation schemes, and that's what they're designed for, they're the first opportunity that you get to really get to know a firm and see if it's right for you, because it is very much a two-way process. This is not just for the recruiters to identify whether you're the right fit for them. It's your opportunity to make sure a firm's right for you. You spend so much time in work that you need to make sure that the place you're going to work for at least 2 years, if not for the foreseeable, is somewhere that you would enjoy to come to work every day and feel positive. So the virtual vacation schemes are a fantastic opportunity to be able to distinguish firms amongst their categories and actually find out what makes that firm special and whether it's the right firm for you. So just bear that in mind. Okay, application structure. This was kind of the fourth section that we designed because obviously we tailored this towards all your questions. So first of all, how do you differentiate firms from their competitors, and is it sensible to mention different names in applications, or specific names, sorry, in applications? First of all, you differentiate firms by the exact same way that I've just said prior. You research the firms and attend open days, attend virtual vacation schemes, attend vacation schemes, whatever. You'll really get to know what makes a firm tick and how that differs to those of its competitors. So really do experience the firm firsthand, get to know the people. What do they say differentiates them and their firm from other firms? Because as I said, there's nothing that firms like more than talking about themselves and their firms. They're so passionate and open about talking about it. So you can ask them questions. And I was that person at events which would actually ask that question, in front of everybody. I go, what makes your firm different? And they'd look at me like, and they then go into a list of reasons why their firm to them were different from other firms that they've ever worked at prior or that they've experienced firsthand. So definitely ask those questions. Is it sensible to mention specific names in application forms? If you've had a really kind of important or vital conversation with somebody within the department. So for instance, when I attended a Denton's networking event, I had a fantastic chat with a partner there who to this day still kind of resonates with me. And I name dropped him in my application form. When it came to the assessment centre, they asked me about him, asked me about their the conversation that I had and why it really kind of stood out to me. And you can definitely put those experiences there. It shows that you're creating a network, you're networking with people within the firm, but actually be prepared to kind of back that up with a real kind of live conversation that you've had with a real life person. Don't just name Bob from wherever, because they will ask you about that if it comes to assessment centre, the assessment centre round. And finally, is it better to focus on the main practice area that you have an interest in at the firm rather than mentioning a few? Again, what Tracy said prior, it's really okay to have a focus on a main practice area if you've got a real love for that and you can show that you've researched that practice area. If you've worked in it, it's even better. But equally, at the start of your career, and I'm there now, I'm about to start my legal career, and I'm going in with absolutely no preconceptions whatsoever. I'm opening my mind up to experiencing all of my 4 seats, and I'm going to see which one really sits with me, and I know that I perform the best at when I decide which to qualify into. So it's really important to, have an interest, but be open to the fact that it might change when you experience that in real life. What you've experienced in terms of modules, like Tracy said, or anything kind of theoretical is so different in practice, and it's applied differently in practice. So just be open to the fact that your preferences might change. There might be something that you really, didn't like that you thought you would, and something that you love that you thought you wouldn't. So just be open to that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you've answered that question really, really well. If I take the next question on how to answer competency-based questions, these are obviously competency questions are basically testing you on whether you have the requisite skill set to be a successful trainee. And obviously the approach to take is using the STAR approach, which is situation, task, action, result. I've also learned recently that you could do an extra R, so 2 R's, and that extra R could stand for reflection. But yeah, so obviously start with the situation, explain what experience you're doing and what the situation has arisen. Task is what the task you have to solve, or the issue you have to solve, etc. And then action is where the main meat of your answer would be, and this is the steps you took to solve that particular task, and you basically want to work through your thought process and the actions you took. And then you want to conclude nicely with the result, and the result is basically what you achieved, and after the steps you took specifically, and try and quantify it if possible. So for example, in one of my application answers I talk about fundraising, and I work through how the steps I took to kind of meet my fundraising target, etc. And for the result bit here, it was really easy for me to quantify my results by putting a percentage of how much I raised, etc. So that's one way of doing, coming to adding the results basically to your answer. Should I take the next bit as well about the?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So in terms of extracurricular and work experience section, I should probably have spoken about the reflection. The reflection bit in STAR would be you basically talk about what you think went well and what you would have done differently next time to achieve a better result. I don't know why I didn't mention that. But yeah, moving on to the extracurricular and work experience section, you want to be making sure that this section is still selling yourself. So especially for the extracurricular bit, think about what hobbies that you have, and even though it might not seem like relevant to a legal career, it will be of interest to them because they want to know that you're a well-rounded person, that you're interesting, etc. So I talk about my rock climbing a lot in my applications, and although the skill set is not directly applicable to law, I got asked about it in my interview, and it was basically a really good opportunity for me to tell them that I like rock climbing because it puts me outside of my comfort zone, and that's obviously a really good trait to have for a trainee and a successful lawyer. I think we're going to actually pass this question back to you because I think your answer in the first session was was really good.
Oh, thank you. So with the work experience section, what I tend to suggest to my mentees and for the people that are watching this today, I always take the same approach. So first of all, I do tell what the experience was. I then go on to say what skills I've developed. And to be honest, that's pretty much what most candidates do. The bit that they fail to do and where they fall down is they don't go that step further. And that step further is talking about why those skills are relevant to the role in question. And secondly, why will that provide a positive contribution to the firm in question, because that's what the firm wants to know. It wants to know exactly why your work experience has allowed you to develop those skills and how that's going to make you the right candidate for them. So, for example, I'll give you a real life example. I often talk about my role as a shift manager at McDonald's. I think it was a fantastic opportunity for me to develop a number of key skills. So I'd say, my role as a shift manager at McDonald's has allowed me to develop 2 vital skills. These skills are the ability to work under a fast-paced working environment and the ability to collaborate with a team to meet targets. Now, that's what most candidates do. It's that extra level of evaluation that's really needed to make your application stand out. So then I consider, so why is this relevant to the role of a solicitor? Well, the role of the solicitor predominantly focuses on this need to work effectively and provide a fantastic level of client service, even under fast-paced, evolving and fluctuating environments. And there's also a need to work together within a team, or for trainees, or within a department or a sector, in which you are trying to meet your clients' ever-changing and shifting needs. So that's how I would evaluate that part. And then I go on to saying, this will allow me to make a positive contribution to, for example, Taylor Weston, as I know one of their key values is excellence at all levels, and being able to work collaboratively within a team under fast-paced working environments will allow me to ensure an excellent level of client service is achieved for Taylor Weston's clients every time, ensuring that we increase customer loyalty, and also then obviously that subsequently increases profitability. So it's that kind of 4-stage approach. What was the experience, what were the skills, how is it relevant to the role, and why this firm? If you take that approach, you're really kind of going that step further. Firms aren't going to spell it out for you. They're not going to say, why are your extracurricular or your work experience important for the role or the firm? But that's actually what they want you to do. And I've had a lot of conversations with many people within recruitment who say that's where candidates seem to fall down. So just try and take that approach. Make sure you consider every time, why is this relevant to that firm? Why is that relevant to the role? And why are you the right candidate for that firm? And if you do those, you will effectively align your experiences with the firm that you're trying to, to apply to. So that's kind of that question asked. In terms of like writing applications, I'll pass over to you on this because you did this really well before.
Yeah, so when you're writing applications, so obviously there's the generic tips for making sure that you're tailoring yourself, as we've already touched on quite a lot, to the firm. You want to be selling yourself at every opportunity. So, for example, let's say you get the question at the end about extracurricular activities. That's not just a way for you to just, talk about your hobbies. It's you're still trying to use that opportunity to sell yourself. So what I always advise is when you finish writing your application, just look at your answer and make sure you've covered all the key competencies that the firm's looking for on their, like, who we look for bit of their website. And that's by ticking those off, it shows that you prove that you're going to be a good trainee. Other tips for writing applications is just, I guess, structure is really, really important. And I think some of my mentees, they really struggle with that. Even though it's a small word count, it's important to have paragraphs in them, because just remember that HR are going to be reading thousands and thousands of applications, and you want to make their life as easy as possible and for them to remember, what you're saying. Do you have any other tips, Amy?
Yeah, I think just want to add, I think first of all, we often forget that the application form, even though it's a written form, is the first opportunity that you get as a candidate to show your personality and show the firm what makes you. And I think often candidates feel that they have to, and I to be honest, I was guilty of this myself, going through the process of writing what I expect or what I think they want me to write about. But actually what I've realised is they're so interested in getting to know you and your personal hobbies. Something I often wrote about this application season, it's gone down greatly, is my Morris dancing, which many of you might not know what that is, but it's a hobby that I've done since I was 2, and I really, really love it. It's been fantastic to developing so many skills, and I currently run my own Morris dancing group. But actually, you might think as a lawyer, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to think about Morris Johnson, because what does that mean? You know, how does that going to make you a great solicitor? But actually, what they asked me is, you know, you must have to dedicate your time, you know, a lot to this. You do a lot of fundraising with it. You're constantly, you know, traveling across the country, and you're always trying to raise money for their, you know, for people's clothing that they're performing in, their equipment. You know, that to them shows that I am the type of person that no matter what it is that I commit myself to, I am reliable, I'm hardworking, and I'm committed. And actually, you know, when I was in my interview, I walked in, and the first thing the partner that I was speaking to said was, you know, what's Morris dancing? And I was like, please do not ask me to do a demonstration, because this is not the right time and I am not in the right attire. But equally, it just kind of, it reduced the stress completely and the anxiety. And it just shows that they are looking for more than that kind of atypical, fantastic candidate with grades. It's brilliant. We all have fantastic grades, but it's about being an all-rounded individual and showcasing that you do have more about you than just the standard things that most students or applicants have. So don't be scared to show yourself and your personality throughout the application form. Okay, so we're going on to the common questions now. So there were quite a few questions that you asked us to consider, but we took kind of two most basic questions, and we provided with an insight into our example answers. So Tracy, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so you'll definitely be asked on application forms the why law, structured in different ways. They might ask, why do you want to be a lawyer, etc. This answer is obviously going to be very different from person to person, because we're all going to have different experiences, and our reasons for why we want to go into law are going to vary. But my tips for this question and how to answer it is just draw on your experiences to date, obviously, that show that you have a genuine interest in law, and then obviously you want to talk about those in your answer, but avoid telling a really long story about how you, I don't know, saw something on TV and you decided that that was what made you want to be a lawyer. Just stick to the point. And you want to make sure that this answer is directly applicable to a career in law as opposed to any other career, because I think sometimes this answer can be applicable to other careers, because there's a lot of skill sets and that are covered in different types of careers, but you want to make sure that it's, you know, a really detailed answer on why law specifically, and you want to be persuasive in your answer. And by doing that, and to do that, you should draw on your experiences, obviously, to back it up. I think it might be clearer if we move on to our example answers, just because I think seeing exact examples is easier to kind of know what I'm talking about rather than just me trying to explain it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just something to point out before I go on to this example answer. One thing that I found is really helpful kind of activity to do is actually to sit down with a pen and a piece of paper and go back to the basics. Why did you apply to law in the first place? And what is it about law that really kind of stands out for you as opposed to other careers? Because when you sit down and you think this is probably the easiest question that you can answer, you'll actually realise, how do I put it into words why I want to be a lawyer? You know, it's so difficult to do it in a concise and persuasive way. So the best thing for you to do is to pinpoint kind of personal stories, but not going off on a tangent. You know, what was it about law that really stood out to you, that really kind of made this the right career for you? So for instance, in my example, one of the first things I say is that I have, from my previous experiences, have really enjoyed being able to perform under fast-paced working environments, but I actually really like to stand up for the rights of others. Now, those that have known me since I was a child will say that I was the person in the playground when bullies were bullying people, who would stand up and say, absolutely not on my watch, because I just do not, you know, I'm that type of person that no matter what, I'll stand up for the person, the little guy. And that was probably why law was always, my mum always said, you're going to be a lawyer, because I always were argumentative, but I also like to stand up for the rights of others. And actually it's that ability to work under fast-paced environments and the ability to provide under, you know, unparalleled level of service. So like Tracy, I have always worked in client-facing roles, so McDonald's, and then I currently work as a customer relations manager in a tech and media company. Now, both of these roles predominantly focus on providing a service to clients, and it's that physical interaction that I really, really enjoy. So, you know, as a lawyer, you can have all the grades, you know, across the sun, but if you can't build relationships and maintain trusting and loyal relationships, then the firm isn't going to be profitable, because that's what sets you apart. So my experiences to date have allowed me to develop an ability to provide an excellent level of service, which I hope puts me in great stead for the role of a sister, and allows me to kind of positively contribute to the firm that I'm starting my training contract with. So that's something to remember. Now, on to the second paragraph. It might not ask you why you want to be a commercial solicitor, but if it doesn't specifically ask it, you should still, you know, if it's a commercial role that you're applying to, you should try to focus on it if you can, because, you know, there are many, many different sectors, and the fact you're going into a commercial firm, and, you know, there's so many different firms out there, you need to actually pinpoint what the reasons were for this type of law over other types of law that you have, you know, the option to kind of engage with. So for me, I use a personal story here, and I, you know, expressly state that my mother is a managing director of a media company, and I've always been around this idea of what makes a kind of business tick, what sets a firm apart, how do they stay kind of in a successful and advantageous position in the market. I've always been, you know, able to look at clients and how something that's happening within their environment could potentially impact on our business or their clients. So it's that idea that I've always been interested in commerce. I've always been interested in how a business performs, and it means that I need to work for a firm that provides this type of service. So just try to focus on that. And it's that idea of being able to kind of engage with high-end corporate clients as well. You know, I said before in the earlier session, and probably 2/3 of the people that were listening would probably think she's crazy, but I really enjoy working under kind of demanding environments. In my current role, I pretty much manage a team of 7 individuals. I'm responsible for so many different things, and I'm doing the legal path on the side. And people would say, how are you managing your time? But I thrive in situations where I've kind of got a heavy caseload, I've got a lot of responsibility, so it means that I can show a clear affiliation with the role of a commercial solicitor, because that is exactly what it consists of, and I'll be able to hopefully perform well under it. So just align the kind of responsibilities, the role, with your own key skills and your own key experiences, and why that will put you in great stead for the role in question. I'll pass over to you now, Tracy.
Yeah. So when I said that you have to kind of draw on your experiences, if you can see in my answer, for every point that I make, so for example, in the first paragraph, one of my reasons for why I wanted to go into law was because of the variety of work it offers, and the opportunity to act for large clients in multiple industries. So then I drew on my experience volunteering at the PSU to back up this point. I also mentioned that the first, you know, I guess sentence of each paragraph should kind of give the reader a really easy way of just seeing what you're going to basically give as an answer. So just looking at this, my 3 reasons were obviously the variety of work it offers, but delivering service to a client and building lasting business connections. And then in my third one was just obviously because my interest slanting towards those which have an integral role in the business community. So that's what I meant when I said that the first line of each paragraph should basically structure your answer. But yeah, every point that I make, you can see that I draw on my experiences to kind of back it up.
Yeah. Okay, so the second question, which is very, very common, why this firm? And actually, this is probably one of the most important questions, because firms are constantly asking, well, what is it that makes us different, and why have you decided to apply to us? And I said to Casey before, and I honestly believe it, the rule of 3 is scientifically proven to ensure that the recruiter keeps it in their mind so much easier by actually focusing on 3 key reasons why you feel that firm differentiates itself from its competitors and why you want to work for them. So whether that's the people, the training and development opportunities, the culture, the clients, the type of work that they engage with, the sector approach, whatever it is, be sure to focus on it in a way that you're going, you'll start by saying, these are the reasons why I am applying to the firm, and I'm going to discuss those in detail or something along those lines. And then actually go into why is it that those particular things that you've pinpointed as the key reasons why you're applying, why they are important to you. So for instance, again, it's not necessary to put facts or statistics. It's not beneficial, and it will pretty much be irrelevant if you've not allowed it to kind of resonate with why you are applying to that firm and why it differentiates your options to this particular firm. So use your research and be able to link that back to the firm in question. Identify what differentiates the firm from others. That's a key thing. So you can use the differentiations between firms against, within your application to show that not only you've researched firms and you've been able to identify what makes them different, but because of those differences, that's why you're applying. So again, look at the firm's values. I think that's really important. When I applied to Taylor Weston, this question came up, and I specifically said, I had read that their values, and I'd spoken to a couple of people at different events, whether it was law fair or whatever, and I found that everybody was really approachable and friendly. And for me, I'm quite a bubbly person, and I want to work for a firm that encourages me to be myself, to be friendly, to be happy. And I quickly kind of aligned myself with the firm and their values, and it made it the right choice for me. Equally, if you possess a number of skills that you think they're particularly what that firm is looking for, and you'll be able to identify on the firm's website or the research that you conduct what are the skills that they are looking for their future trainees. Marry that up, showcase that you have the skills and that's what they're looking for. And here is the example of why that you're the right pick for that firm. And finally, again, networking. This is a really good kind of top tip, in the sense that, as I said prior, there's nothing that firms like to do or their employees like to do more than talk about their firm and why they think their firm is the right fit for them. So ask that, flip the question back on them. Why is this firm the right firm for you? Because they might give you some insight into what they think is the reason their firm is different and why you should apply to it. And you can then use your research and your further kind of investigation to actually decipher whether that is actually the reason you're applying. And if so, write it in your application. You're making it relevant and you're using your experiences wisely. So hopefully that helps. Now onto the sixth section, which is about commercial awareness. I think we've only got one more section left. So what is the most effective way to answer a commercial awareness question? Do you want me to take this, or do you want to take this?
I think you had a really good structure to answer this question, so I think you should.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so this is very common, and it's quite a, I guess, difficult section for everybody, and it's one that probably creates the most anxiety. How do we make this commercial awareness topic relevant to the firm, and how do we actually answer the commercial awareness question? And my top tips on how to structure it is, first of all, find a topic you find really interesting. You can't talk about something persuasively if you haven't really read into it enough to know how it kind of resonates with you and why it interests you. So do pick a topic you find interesting. Start off with a basic introduction as to what the topic is, what's happening within the environment that you're considering, and then go on to, first of all, why it interests you. So is it a particular sector that you're interested in? Make sure you state that. Is it interesting because it kind of shapes the way you view something and how a firm is going to innovate, for example, or how the legal practice is going to be shaped? To again actually detail why you find it interesting. And I think the final and the most important part is, it's not enough just to say, if it says, for example, talk about a commercial awareness topic that you've read and why it interests you. What they want you to do, and they're not saying it specifically, but they want you to say, why is that relevant to us? They might not be stating that, but please do make sure you make it relevant to the firm, because all the questions that they're asking, they want you to show them why it's relevant to them and their firm. So go that step further, identify why the particular commercial awareness topic may impact on the firm, the legal practice, or their clients, and is there a kind of avenue in which they can use to kind of provide their services to others? So is there an area of growth that firms could look into? And that will be that little bit of extra evaluation that will stand your application out from others, because you're making it relevant to the firm. it sounds very silly, but I was speaking about something. I can't remember what my topic was in my interview at one of the firms. And I said, you know, it's a really good opportunity for your growth because you could do this, this, and this. And they went, we've not even considered that. That's really interesting. So you actually might pick up on something that they've not already considered. So don't be scared to really evaluate the topic, you know, effectively, because they are going to be interested, and it's about, you know, knowing it inside and out. So one of the pieces of top tips that I've been given through this application process, which I think was really important in my interview with some of the firms I've interviewed with, is actually following the article from the very start. So you're probably looking at articles now, you're probably answering the, you know, a commercial awareness question now, but they will ask you about it when you get to your interview or your assessment centre, and you need to show that you followed the kind of topic across the year, because it might change. You know, it might be resolved, it might be dropped altogether, or it might have completely shifted, or your views and opinions might have completely shifted, and you need to keep kind of a toe with what's going on. So don't be that candidate that's at the assessment centre going, I'm really sorry, I haven't actually looked at that, because you've just kind of done it for the application, because it will kind of come back around full circle. So yeah, I hope that answers that question, and I hope it's an effective structure. Do you want to move on to the next questions?
Yeah, I just want to say I completely agree. It's really important that you talk about an issue that you are interested in. There's been times where I've kind of plucked out something that I spoke about in applications just because I thought that's what they wanted to hear, and at the end of the day, in an interview, they're gonna see right through it. So obviously, yeah, find something you're genuinely interested in, but also there's going to be hot topics around whenever you're writing applications, and obviously, for example, like Brexit, COVID is probably going to be spoken a lot in applications. So just be mindful of the fact that other people might be using that as an example. So if you can find something else that you're interested in that actually affects the firm as well, then I would kind of focus on that more. In terms of how to find deals, news that you find interesting, and where to do further research to see where it's progressed, I find it really useful to keep updated with firms' websites, and they often publish kind of news about things that are concerning them, or even like work that they're doing. But you don't have to base your answer on specific work that they're doing, but at the same time, I think just reading up on different platforms what's going on. So start with news on the firm's website, but then obviously like the normal stuff of what you'd use to develop commercial awareness, which links really nicely to this slide. So these are all the resources that we kind of use to develop our commercial awareness, and we've used to keep up to date with changes. So yeah, I mean, I also just wanted to quickly say about work experience, both legal and non-legal. People tend to forget that you can develop commercial awareness outside of just reading up on things. So I've been in the hospitality industry for quite a number of years now, and without realizing, I've learned a lot about what makes businesses successful in hospitality, and what they're concerned about, and how regulations could change that affect the profits and revenue of pubs. So I think, Amy, you've also had experience in what was it?
Yeah. So in my current role, I work within a media company, and as you can imagine, there's so many things that can happen. Basically, my firm develops websites and then markets them online, and there can be kind of shifts in the environment. So an example that springs to mind was when GDPR was introduced, and you needed to show that you were storing information in a correct and safe manner. We had to then proactively adapt all of our firm's sites and our client sites so that they could showcase to a legal individual that they are safely and securely storing information, and that their clients or their customers have confirmed that. So that's a perfect example of how you can actually develop your commercial awareness within a job, because it might not be legal work experience, but you will gain that kind of insight and that kind of ability to look ahead, identify things that potentially could impact on your your firm or your client, and ensure that they're in the best position to react to that. And that is all what commercial awareness is. It's such a common thing. What is commercial awareness? Well, commercial awareness is not something that you're going to have overnight, and it's not something that you're going to completely kind of smash and be able to get. It's something that's developed as you go through your kind of personal careers, your personal experiences, and your professional career. And it's that ability to identify trends within a market or things that are happening within a market, and looking at how it can both positively or negatively impact on your firm in question or its clients. So if you take that approach in your daily lives, you'll all be developing commercial awareness as you're talking, and as you're learning and experiencing things that might not be, legal work experience. The final point is, you can literally have a chat in the morning, and I often do it. When I go for a coffee, I'll be chatting with somebody in work, and I'll say, "Have you heard about that's gone on in the news?" And then we start to open up a discussion, and it's that kind of discussion that again increases your commercial awareness, because you're considering your thoughts on a matter. And don't be scared to put forward what it is that interests you about that about that article, or what your thoughts are, because it's not necessary to sit on the bench. You need to have a definite position on a matter and show that this is why you feel that. Because candidates, when you get to an application or an assessment centre, they're going to expect you to have your own beliefs, your own understanding, and your own kind of thoughts on a matter, and you've got to be confident enough to show that. So do get into the kind of mindset of considering things and what your opinion are on those matters that are happening within the legal and business environment. So the final part of the session has come, which are kind of our common mistakes. And something that Tracy said before, which has really resonated with me, is this idea that we're creating this PowerPoint, and we'll have subsequent Zoom sessions in the future, and both of us have our own things going on in our own platforms. But we're doing this predominantly because we want you to avoid the mistakes that we've made. And it took me 3 years to secure a training contract. And it's only now, upon reflection, doing all these things that I'm doing, that I've actually identified the things I've done that are not right, that have potentially kind of increased the journey that I've been on. So, do take from this as much as you can, because you may not do the same kind of mistakes that we've done that have kind of led us to the position that we're in now, which, we do learn from those mistakes. And it's not something to be upset or kind of get bogged down in, but we can pass on this information and hopefully help others. And so first of all, one of the things that I say is, do not just tell a story or state a statistic for the sake of it. We both kind of stress this enough throughout the application process. Don't just put something because you think it's important. Make it relevant to the firm and the role. Go that step further. Don't be generic. It's not enough just to kind of state something for the sake of it. You need to make it relevant to the firm, but also make it personal to you. Every question should show that you know the firm. You actually spoke about this earlier, and I think it's, if you want to continue with it, Tracy, about showing the firm, showing that you've identified the firm and the questions you should be asking yourself.
Yeah, I always talk about this whenever I do sessions like this, that throughout your application, you're basically going to want to prove to the firm that that you'd be a good trainee, and that you'd be a great trainee that fits at that particular firm. So just have that in your brain when you're writing application answers, because that's the crux really of making a successful application. And also, don't be afraid of showing your personality. I know it's difficult through an online application to show your personality, but don't be afraid to talk about your hobbies and kind of what you've learned during those hobbies, or etc. Because at the end of the day, they're reading so many applications, and if you have something unique about you, you should really kind of sell that, because that's obviously interesting, and they're gonna pick up on that, and they'll say, oh, this is something that we haven't read before about this person, and they'll obviously want to spend more time on your application. The next tip is, don't just copy and paste. This I cannot stress enough. This is something that I definitely did. But for example, we take a commercial awareness question. You're probably going to think this is the easiest question because I could just copy and paste an answer and I just submit it to another application form. But just don't do that, because while a commercial issue might be of interest and affects a particular firm, that might be of no relevance to another firm at all. So just start from scratch. Don't get lazy with applications, and just really, tailor it to that particular firm. Make sure you answer the question that's been asked. Sometimes I've read applications that are really great answers, interesting answers, but they just don't answer the question. And there are different varieties of the same question in different applications from different firms. So make sure that you're really, really answering the question. So for every answer, whenever I have a paragraph, I take each paragraph and I say, does this answer the question? And then I move on to the next paragraph. And I do that with all the paragraphs to make sure that I'm not going off on a tangent. And last but not least, of course, we must stress again, quality versus quantity. It's so important for you to send off quality applications rather than a large amount of applications.
Absolutely, that's fantastic, and I think you summed that up really well. So just kind of the concluding thoughts. So we got asked this question, and we actually asked ourselves this before we even put together any presentation or plan as to how we were going to do this workshop. I found this was a really important question, and I think it's that ability to self-reflect that's really, really important. At the very fortunate position that me and Tracy are, we've come through the process and we are kind of success stories. So we should be looking at what things we would tell ourselves for the next generation lawyers that are coming through this process now. First of all, do you want to go with yours?
Yeah. So my number one advice would be, don't be generic, sell yourself. Please try and use what we've passed on in this session so that you don't waste the opportunity to really sell yourself to a particular firm. And second of all, rejections do happen. Be prepared to learn from them. And rejections are really important, because I simply wouldn't be here right now with a training contract had I not gone through all the little setbacks through the rejections I received.
Absolutely. The third thing that I say, which is my kind of go-to tip, which is always be your true authentic self. I've been to assessment centres, as I said, that I tried to be somebody that I'm not. And because of that, because I was trying to kind of adhere to the norm and I had this imposter syndrome, I didn't perform to my best at all, and they could see right through that. But the minute that I felt comfortable being myself, and I think a lot of this was being in the right firm, which Taylor Weston is, they really, really encourage, and it's completely branded about the office, this idea of being one's true authentic self. And they do encourage you to have your own kind of uniqueness, your own kind of differences, and they like to harness that in order to provide a fantastic level of service to their clients, but also to have forward-thinking, different thought processes that they wouldn't have got had they just had the same type of candidate each year. So do apply to a firm and continue to invest in a firm that allows you to be your true authentic self, because as I said prior, we spend so much time in work, and you go into a training contract. I'm not starting my training contract thinking this is only 2 years and that's it. I'm thinking this is where I'm going to potentially spend the rest of my life working, and I know I'd be more than happy at this point committing myself to Taylor Weston, because they encourage me to be who I am. So look for the firms that allow you to be yourself. And the final thing, which I always say, is do not make yourself an easy no. You have thousands and thousands of competition, and people applying for the same roles, and you don't want to do silly mistakes like spelling errors, or you've not checked your application, or you've not got your friends to check your application for you, or a second pair of eyes, and you've submitted it and they've just gone no straight away because they've got a spelling error, because you put all that hard work and effort and you've invested so much time into this firm that you do not want to make yourself an easy no. Make it impossible for them to say anything other than yes. That is the best piece of advice, and hopefully that concludes it all nicely for you. So I just wanted to say a big thank you first of all to Tracy for partaking in this event. I would be lost without her. She's been fantastic. But also thank you to all of you guys for participating and signing up. It's been absolutely fantastic to try and give you an insight into kind of our experiences to date, and hopefully you've gathered some information that will put you in great stead for this application cycle. Just do your best. Try to be yourself, be your true authentic self. Don't be scared to kind of put your personality out there. If you have any issues at all or want to ask any questions, now is the time to ask. So we've got a bit of time for questions. Sorry that we have run over. I do apologise. But does anybody have any particular questions that they want to ask? Fine. If not, you can ask via email, amy@thelegalpath.co.uk, or message us, either of us, on Instagram and LinkedIn. But does anybody have any questions? Oh, 1 second, chat's going on.
That's great. Everything.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's brilliant. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Oh, actually, we do have a question. I know you've already answered that, because yeah, it's okay. No, thank you everybody for coming. It's been absolutely amazing to have you all, and see you guys next time for the next session. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Amy. Thanks everyone for coming.
It's been amazing. Thank you.